Well, I might just reminisce a little bit on what my dad kind of told me. My dad was born in Madison, Wisconsin, or at Lodi, a little town out of Madison, and born and raised on a farm there. And then his father came to Montana, and actually in the early days there became a locator for for Great Northern Railroad, Jim Hill. And of course Jim Hill, he was eager to get people out here, so he really got a sales bulletin going telling that the country was just like Indiana, grass up to the bellies of cows, and all the positive things he could think of. He forgot to tell them, though, that it forgets to rain once in a while in Montana. So there was kind of migration. You could he would provide what they called an immigrant car on the railroad, and someone that was wanting to move to Montana could put all these household stuff and all this stuff in one end, and he could even put a few cows and chickens and pigs on the other end. And sometimes they'd be 2 weeks on the railroad. But then they would side them at like a Big Sandy or a Carter and everything, and let the people kind of live in the car there while they would find a place that they could homestead on. And he brought in a lot of people that way. And his dad, and in the meantime, had platted the township, or the town site of Carter. In fact, there's still a Stewart edition in the plat book of Carter, Montana. They platted up the lots, kind of. Yeah. He kind of platted up, and they call it the Stewart edition. Oh. And people could buy them if you wanted to build a house in Carter. The old hotel is not a hotel anymore, but the building is still there, and it's been kind of fixed up. When he first came in, he rode a freight train in and to the state, and he was kicked off the freight train at Culberson, Montana, and he spent the summer there working for on the ferry there. That was, of course, Culberson had a ferry across the Missouri River, and it wasn't until years later they finally put a bridge in. And then I think he had to go back to school. He wanted to finish high school, and then that winter he went back and finished high school, and then in about 1909 or so came out.
Well, I was born in southern Wisconsin, out in the country, and it was, I recall, a little country post office that has been discontinued for a good many years at Hires Corner, which was close to Madison, Wisconsin. Then I went to high school at Madison and graduated from Madison High School before I came out here. Yes, suddenly there's a group of businessmen there at Madison that bought a big ranch, and they called it the Bank Ranch, and they hired my father to come out and run the ranch or supervise the ranch. And it was a pretty big ranch. They had, as I recall, 1,000 acres of irrigated alfalfa, and they run a band of sheep and I don't know how many cattle. Big spread. Well, then when he was, the first time I came to Montana, when he worked for them, and then I was only, I think, 15 years old or 16, and I could run on that hay, I could run on what they call an overshot stacker. I could do that. It took a man to do it, someone, but I could do that, and then I drew a man's wages.
The country was all open, and of course they had these big cattlemen. That since the country was open, the grass was free, and they just let the cattle graze on the grass. They could graze clear to the Canadian line, and Dad kind of rode as a cowboy then, in that time frame. Well, then he wasn't old enough to. He had to be 21 to get it. So A.H. got a fella, I don't know his name, that filed on this place, but Dad did all the work. He built the shack and busted the 80 acres and everything like that. And then I think in 1911 or 12, when Dad was 21, he filed what they called a relinquishment in favor of Dad. And that was done quite a little. But, and I'm not sure, see, Marie's homestead is just up there. You'll find there's the old basement's up there yet.
Where's this, up on the road?
Just east of the buildings here, about half a mile. And then Burl had one over on the other side of the road. And in a way, Dad kind of worked all three of these because the girls, they didn't want to do that. And that gave Dad quite an advantage, because it actually gave him 3/4 of a section. Otherwise, it was just 160. Well, then they found out that in this country, 160 acres you couldn't make a living on. He eventually bought them, you know, from the girls. And anyway, so actually he worked for these big cattle outfits, and kind of as a range rider. And unfortunately, his reputation, since he worked for the big cattle outfits, wasn't very good with the homesteaders. And because lots of times the early day homesteaders didn't build adequate fence. They'd maybe make a 2 or 3 wire fence, you know, and everything. Well, those old longhorn range cattle, that didn't mean anything to them. And if they had a nice crop growing, it wasn't unusual for a herd of cows to get in there and mow it down. So he wasn't really well thought of. And so anyway, but